So, how much of a role does your daughter play in this book?
Katie's story is really the catalyst that started me on a path to researching. So the book is divided into three parts. Part one is very, very brief. It's Katie's story. It talks about how she was being taunted at school, and I wrote about it, and it struck a responsive chord, a nerve with the world. And when we received just this outpouring of support for her being a girl who could love Star Wars, I thought there was something bigger going on in the world of bullying, that this particular story received such an unbelievable response. So that's when I decided I wanted to learn more about bullying, and I started to research the book. So part one is just that bit of background. Part two of the book is a very in-depth exploration of bullying in our culture. Who is at target? Who's at elevated risk? Why? How does the bullying play out? What are the different forms? I interviewed parents, teachers, kids, bullies, victims, social workers, psychologists, celebrities, everyone I could. And so the second section is a real look at real people and what has happened to them. And then the third part of the book is basically prescriptive. It says, well, now we see the problem, we see the pain, what do we do about it? And the third section of the book is, solutions and ideas and ways to deal with bullying. So although Katie comes up, quite heavily in the first part because it's her story, from there on, she really only appears in the book anecdotally. It's a very heavy topic, bullying, and so at points, to add a little levity, I might bring in an anecdote with Katie and her sister here or there that is applicable to something I was talking about, somewhat to lighten it up, but also to bring it back home and say, as a parent, here's something you can try at home, this particular technique. If you want to try this anti-bullying technique, I tried it with my girls and here was how it worked. And that's how they might show up in it. But other than that, the book is not about my children. Because bullying takes place on a continuum. There's very, very minor and very, very severe. And Katie, being only in first grade at the time, and us intervening early, it was minor. It was not severe. She was not being thrown in lockers or tortured. Her friends aren't online, so she wasn't cyberbullied. She was bullied, and the way that we knew that is she fit the criteria. To know if someone's being bullied or not, there are three criteria. One is the action repetitive? So if the boys had said to her one day, Star Wars is for boys, Katie, don't bring that again, but then they kind of dropped it, it would have been a taunt, but it would have been what it was. But when it starts happening every day, and it's at lunch and at the lockers and at recess, then you find the repetitiveness. The second criteria is that it has to be an unwanted tease. Teasing in and of itself can be a good-natured, fun thing. When you tease someone, it tends to go back and forth. Each party is talking and laughing. Each party is making a joke. Unwanted teasing is a whole different thing, and that's when the recipient is not laughing back, and the recipient is not offering a joke back. It's not a two-way thing. And so that is the second thing. So you've got the repetitive and the unwanted teasing. And then the third thing is that bullying has a power imbalance. So it's not like two peers, kind of joshing with each other. Bullying is when it's either a bigger kid with a smaller kid, or a kid with more social capital against a kid with less social capital. That's a power imbalance. Or in Katie's case, it was multiple boys and just one Katie. So when you have the power balance added in, you look at the whole picture, and now you're looking at bullying. So if someone punches your kid one time on the playground, it's not bullying, it sucks, and it's fighting. If your kid is punched by that same kid every day, and then your kid starts to become afraid and doesn't want to go to the playground, now you're looking at bullying. And then there's a fourth element that Barbara Coloroso, who's another author and studies bullying, she's identified a fourth element, which I think is right on. She says the fourth element of bullying is that the victim starts to develop fear. And when that happens, when the victim develops fear, you have a situation where they're even more unable to stand up for themselves. Some people say, what's with all this intervening and social emotional learning and empathy training. Just teach the kids to sock the bully in the face. But if you have someone who's being bullied, not always, but in many cases, the victimized person is being rendered so psychologically helpless that they can't just sock the bully in the face. If you've got a kid with Asperger's, or if you have a kid who's scared, or a smaller kid who's been taunted, you know, it's just not a possibility sometimes for those kids to just turn around and sock the bully in the face. So that argument, it really is not a good one when you're looking at true incidences of bullying. And so as a result, when I did my research, I decided to write a book from the point of, besides saying punch them back, what can we do that is going to actually help? And not help just the victims, but the bullies too. Because the fact is that the bullies, the kids who are the bullies, they need intervention. Most of them need psychological care. Kids who are bullies are at elevated risk for ending up in prisons and having psychological problems, antisocial disorders, or depression, anxiety. So it's really in our best interest to intervene not just for the victims, but for the bullies too. Otherwise, society pays the cost down the road when these childhood bullies become juvenile offenders who are now senior and older offenders and are sitting in prison. The fact is that bullies feed off of a reaction. And so if you cry, or if you shudder, or if you scream back, there is no doubt that you're giving the bully what he or she wants. And so there is some truth to don't give a reaction. However, you have to be very cautious that when you tell that to a child, you're not giving them the message of how you're feeling doesn't matter, or just ignore it. You need to give your child a couple other skills to go along with this. What I like to do is teach them how to do what's called cognitive reframing of the event. So cognitively reframing the event is taking what's happening and having your child learn that he or she is not to blame for what's happening. A classic example, let's say that somebody picks on your child because she's overweight. Let's say that they're telling her she's fat and ugly. Sure, you don't want her to give a reaction, because if she does, then it will probably continue. But you also don't want her to just implicitly accept these labels. So what she has to learn how to do is say, they're not picking on me because I'm fat. They're picking on me because they're choosing to be mean. And they've identified this particular characteristic of me. If your child thinks to herself, they're picking on me because I'm fat, by putting because in front of her characteristic, she's implicitly accepting blame for it. And she's letting herself feel flawed. And so she has to be able to say to herself, I'm not the problem. They are the problem. They are unkind. And because they're the problem and they're unkind, they aren't deserving of my reaction. So if you can get her to think that way before not giving a reaction, not just teach her to freeze and not react, but to teach her to think, I'm okay. I'm a good person. And I don't need to respond to this and give them a reaction because they're just being mean. If you can just get that first step in there where your child cognitively reframes the event, then she can walk away. And quite frankly, then it's easier not to give a reaction and it's genuine. If your child is able to think through that and say to herself, this isn't worth my time because these aren't people who I need to give my energy to, it's a lot easier for her genuinely to not respond. And then the taunting is less likely to continue. But there has to be that process that goes along with it. And so what I like to tell teachers is, yes, teach a child not to give a reaction, but also teach the child the best way not to give a reaction is to become confident enough in yourself that you aren't going to be as hurt. I mean, we're all human, and it hurts to be told mean things. But if you can say to yourself, I'm okay, they're being mean, it's easier to just walk away.
See?
You want to sing with me? You swim so wild and you swim so free. Heavens above and the sea below, and a little white whale on the go. Baby beluga, I hate you. And I don't truly start to believe that I'm the worst mom ever, or that they hate me. When my kids are mad at me and tell me, you want to blow a kissy?